Welcome back into another episode of George in the Jungle, presented by Remington Tavern. You can find Remington Tavern at 8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have their daily happy hour from 3 to 7 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. You can find them on Instagram at RemyTav Cincy. That's REMITAV Cincy with a Y, or follow them on Facebook. But with that, George, if I can find where my
yes, sir. There we go.
there
How
we
we
go.
doing?
I'm doing all right. Doing all right. It was
Fired up about this trade deadline and those awesome moves the Reds made.
what an uneventful trade deadline. Maybe the most
A
uneventful
lot
I
of
can remember.
action, and I can't tell you one thing that matters that they did, but it was a lot of action.
My
I mean, what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different transactions, and I,
we
are
can
they any
we can
better?
we can
Are they any worse?
we can certainly start there. The first of these moves came yesterday, where the Reds acquired first baseman Ty France and cash considerations for catcher Andrew Salcido. I know who Ty France is. I can at least say that. I know
Yes,
about 2 years ago, he was mashing in Seattle. But that's I think that's the end of my thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say, and we can run through these, is they got a couple right-handed bats with some pop where they've kind of needed that, I guess. So maybe that's going to help them a little down the stretch. But it's you're betting on guys to play better than what they have this season, and for some of them even parts of last season. So we'll see. But yeah, that was the first move. Then they get the former UC player.
Yep, of course that comes via the Frankie Montas trade and Joey Weimer, a homecoming of sorts.
Yep. And you know what? I don't know how much better this trade makes the Reds, but it makes sense because Frankie wasn't helping. He had an earned run average over 5. He just wasn't back to his old self, and I don't know if he ever will be. And the Reds weren't going to pick up that option next year. It was a mutual option for like $20 million. That wasn't going to happen. So they were going to be holding a $3 million bag on the buyout there. So the Reds come out a little bit ahead there, I think. I think they did okay on this deal. They get Jacob Junis, the relief pitcher, who, Milwaukee liked as a starter at one time, but he was injured, couldn't handle that starting role when he came back. But he seems to be settling in pretty well as a bullpen piece. And Weimer has promise. I mean, he plays a good outfield. He's got some pop. He just has a big hole in that swing, I guess, because he's not hitting very well this year for average. But I think the Reds feel like it was worth a roll of the dice. And it's a kid that they've liked since he was at UC. And, big kid, runs well, has some pop, and they're just going to see if they can get something out of him. And he may serve as a viable piece off the bench and a 4th, 5th outfield.
Yeah, they needed help in the outfield. And we saw today that they traded away the piece they just recently acquired from San Francisco,
right?
For in the outfield, and maybe you're able to catch some lightning in a bottle. I know Cincinnati is a little bit smaller of a park than Milwaukee, so maybe you're able to do something there. As far as Frankie Montas goes, you have him pitching in Cincinnati as opposed to the Yankees is not necessarily a pitcher's ballpark either, but Cincinnati is not necessarily where you want to try and get a rehab assignment for a guy and hope you're getting his best days.
Right.
Just all things being honest. Maybe you're able to do something miraculous, but that was not the case. I felt, honestly, I don't know if you watched his going away presser, his last presser as a Cincinnati Red. I actually felt bad for the guy.
Yeah, I know.
seemed like he genuinely like loved being here.
Yeah.
He loved his family and the way they were accepted in the clubhouse. He clearly appreciated the relationships he had built here. He even mentioned, I guess, that he would be open to a reunion down the road with the Reds. And he didn't have to say any of those things. He was here for less than a season.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, he had some uneven times with the Yankees where he was hurt and, things went south the season before that too. And I think he felt like he found kind of a place he really liked and a home here. And that's the brutal part of this business, man. And he'll be fine. He's making $15 million this year. He's going to get that $3 million buyout probably at the end. He'll be fine. But yeah, that was, I did feel for him. And backing up a little here, you talk about Weimer and his bat and his right-handed power and coming to Great American. Same with Ty France. He's got some serious pop. And coming from Seattle, that is not a hitter's paradise.
Not a hitter's park at all.
Might get a little juice out of that guy. We'll see. It's worth, I don't know anything about this catcher they sent to Seattle. He's a 21-year-old in the minors. And catchers, I don't know. You don't look at their stats and say that's their value. And he didn't have much in the hitting department, but he's only 21 years old. But you don't know how good they are behind the plate, what kind of game they call that. But the Reds would certainly know a lot better than I, but they thought that was worth doing. And Ty France has been a viable commodity a couple years back. So he's hit some home runs. So I guess that's probably worth a shot. Nothing blows me away about any of these trades, but and I certainly don't know how much help they're going to get down the stretch here, but hopefully they do, because they certainly could use some right-handed pop. With CES out of the lineup, Marte struggling, they need that.
You also lose your most tenured Red, not named TJ Antone or Tyler Stevenson, as Lucas Sims goes to Boston. He's going to be one of the Red Sox out there in Boston. And you bring back a right-handed pitcher, Ovis Portis.
Yeah, 19-year-old kid. And he can bring it. He's got some good strikeout numbers. Like a lot of young guys that can throw it, he's probably got to get his control a little better, but he's only 19. So, Lucas Sims, we know what he was. And yes, he could help you out in the bullpen some, but I think probably they felt like they'd run their course with him and pump a little pitching blood into that system, and you can never have too much of that. It's certainly by no means a blockbuster, and I don't think it's going to kill the Reds, but this move certainly isn't going to help them this year down the stretch. But who knows? Maybe this kid pans out and it turns out to be a steal in 5 years, but that doesn't happen very often either, but we'll see.
Speaking of moves not going to help us down the stretch, the Reds acquired a player to be named later or cash considerations. Who knows? In exchange for outfielder Austin Slater, infielder Levon Soto, and cash considerations. So you brought in the aforementioned Austin Slater from San Francisco, and he was here for a cup of coffee.
Yeah, and then you just spin him off and wheel him for something else. His head's got to be spinning. But that's Major League Baseball, man. And so
he also finds himself in a way better situation going to Baltimore.
Without a doubt. He kind of hit the baseball playoff lottery there. But they got cash or a player to be named later. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Sure.
I guess a lot of that has to do with what they get out of Slater down the stretch. And then they had one other deal, right?
They did. As the Reds essentially are replacing Levon Soto that they sent off to Baltimore with infielder Davis Wenzel. He comes from the Texas Rangers, and they got him for cash considerations. He's expected to go straight to AAA, and we'll see what that is.
Probably the cash they got from the Mariners went to the Rangers for, I don't know. But they certainly moved a lot of deck chairs on the boat, but I don't know that it matters a whole lot. We'll see. They didn't exactly it wasn't like it was interesting because I heard Nick Kroll talking about this, and they were kind of sellers and buyers. They certainly didn't upset the apple cart at all with what they have on the current roster, but they didn't add a whole lot. It's been a weird season for the Reds, and this trade deadline stuff falls right in line with it. And we'll see how it pans out down the road, but it's just a very, very interesting 48 hours for this team with the moves they made. And it's just like, God, you sit there. I mean, they got to have a lot of people keep a lot of eyes out to kind of go and make moves like this. But that's the business they're in. They've got to know all this stuff. And that's a lot of stuff to keep your eyes on, knowing you want a 19-year-old pitching prospect or, David Wenzel or, it's just crazy to me, but that's how it works. And that's their business. And I don't expect any dividends to pay much for this year, but we'll see. Maybe Weimer
to me,
can make a little bit of a difference with some right-handed pop.
To me, it felt like Nick Kroll was talking a little bit out of both sides of his mouth. And I just wonder if he was essentially told, you can do whatever you want to do. Here are our untouchables. And there was probably, truthfully, looking at the trades that were made and the trades that were not made, it seemed to me that there were probably more untouchables than I would have had. Or he may have been told, do not spend a dime over where we're currently at. Matter of fact, you can cut payroll, but you cannot add anything at all.
And that's with shipping Frankie out, they kind of that almost pays for everything else they did, depending on what those cash considerations are and those other deals. But it looks like they probably came out on the plus side. And I would say, I will agree that they probably did say we're not going to add a whole lot of anything when it comes to payroll when you look at these deals. And they're going to have work to do in the offseason. Because this is not by any stretch anything close to a winning product or a division winning product by the time you roll around the next year if you don't add something in the offseason.
I guess that's where I'm trying to find a silver lining in any of this, is that you freed up some money for next year that you didn't necessarily have otherwise. And if you're going to make some moves for some dudes next year, if you're going to make a move to actually try and compete, to your point, you're going to have to spend some money. You simply have to. If you want to put asses in those seats at Great American Ballpark, there's a lot of empty seats. And if you're not winning games, we've shown you where else are you going to go. There's plenty of places to go. Stay at home.
Well, you look at last year too, when they did turn it around. They brought up the kids. They had that winning streak, and they started putting butts in the seats down there.
Yeah,
it was a whole different dynamic. And this year, it just hasn't taken off. And you've got to win in Cincinnati if you're going to put butts in the seats. And I don't care which program, which team. I mean, You look at look at what the Bengals did before they drafted Joe Burrow in that season. That they picked up a couple wins. I forget what their record was, 2-14 maybe. It was empty down there. It was empty. The NFL games, and then just look at any of the other teams that have an off year and you got to win in this market to get people to spend their dough and make the effort to go to the games. And so they're going to have to beef this up in the offseason. You can't just bank on somebody else coming up from the minors or, Rhett Lauder being ready. And then maybe you have a fifth starter in that rotation they have. And Barry Larkin said it tonight. You've got this window with those young pitchers because they're going to end up costing a lot of money on this next contract when they're not under team control. And you're not going to keep all those guys. So, they've got to make it work. And this window is going to be, as long as you have Abbott, Lodolo, and Green at the top of that rotation and still under club control, at least in my book. And it turns out this deal with Hunter Green, that I wasn't so sure about when they made it, might end up being a bargain for the Reds.
go back to the conversation we had with Clay last week, and I agree with Clay that I think you're probably only a couple pieces away, but you're going to have to spend on whatever it takes to get an everyday outfielder in either that center field or right field spot that doesn't have a checkered injury history. You're
Yep.
going to have to find a guy to fill in that somewhere in that 1 through 3 spot in your rotation. You have to. And now you have some holes in your bullpen that you didn't have 2-3 days ago that you're also going to have to fill. So maybe you made some moves that you feel confident that you're going to be able to fill some of those spots. But as of right now, there's more question marks today than we had yesterday. And I don't think that bodes well for where this team's direction is going.
No, and I think if they would have been in straight sell mode, I mean, you probably would have traded Candelario somewhere, and they didn't, and maybe there just wasn't anything enticing enough. But
Jonathan India
was a name that drew a lot of interest, and rightfully so. And I know we had this conversation last week, and I'm probably wrong on this, but I still have this gnawing feeling that McLean settles at shortstop. You can leave India at second, and then you got Ellie somewhere in the outfield. It can be right field. It can be, you know what I'm saying? I know nobody wants him out there because they're afraid he'll get hurt, but I don't know what you do. I mean, here's the other thing. He's got more errors than any shortstop in the game, right? I think I'm right about that. He does make these spectacular plays. He does, but he also boots some routine plays, and I don't know why, but he does. And so I don't know if that's the answer, but I certainly would be considering it. I could be crazy, but I would. Boy, that one gnaws at me. I'm just thinking that might be the fix. And
third base.
I'm big on Jonathan India, but I'm telling you what, he's been a lifesaver for this team this year.
Does that mean you're settling in with Noelvi Marte at third? With a
Not necessarily. I could move Ellie over there. Then you got to find a spot, and I guess maybe left field's it for Steer. I don't know. And who knows? Maybe he goes to first base if CES never shows up. I don't know, but at least they do have that kind of flexibility.
Yep. Well, we'll find out. If I'm the Reds, I don't know that McLean sees an at bat this season. Truthfully,
and he may not. He may not. I know it's still. I don't know. The last I saw, they thought maybe he would get back and play some, but we'll see. I hate to see him down for the whole season, but there's no sense rushing the kid back. He needs to be right, and that injury and that surgery, it takes a while to come back and be right. So we'll see. I mean, as always with the Reds, it's kind of like wait and see, and they got to make some moves, and they need to add some stuff. One of these days, maybe they'll have a complete roster, which I don't know if you ever have in baseball anymore. But at least a roster that you have confidence that will be there at the end. And I thought beginning of this season, they kind of had that, but they were eaten up by injuries, and a few other things played into it. But it's time with these guys, and Hunter Green throwing the way he is. They've got to take advantage of this.
I agree. You bring up Hunter Green, who's making a strong case for pitcher of the month for all of baseball, truthfully.
Yeah.
I have his stats here. 27 innings in the 4 starts in July. 27 innings pitched, a .33 earned run average, 9 hits, 29 strikeouts. Beast.
That's insane. That is insane. I mean, that's a really good run, and I'm guessing, Castillo's probably the last guy they had that could put up numbers like that, and sure. Even that, I don't know if he could put up those kind of numbers. I mean, that's a ridiculous month right there.
We also had, by the way, we had winning March, April, June, July, The Reds have had winning months of March, April, June, and July, and that 9-18 in May is kind of the month that sank the ship.
Yeah, because they're 4 games under right now. They'd be right in that wild card hunt if they, I mean, God forbid if they'd gone 500 that month, or even close to it. But yeah, you can't have those. And we talked about it at the time, man. You can't, those games count too. And you can't have those stretches where you falter like that. You just put yourself in too big of a hole. And they did that. And it's tough to turn around and have a month that's 18-9. It just doesn't happen. It's just too tough to do. And that killed them. That stretch killed them. But we'll see. At least there's still something to kind of watch. But as I said, I don't think this year is going to yield a whole lot. But I'd love to see him at least snag a wild card. But I'm not sure about it.
They are currently in the bottom of the 7th against the Chicago Cubs, and they're winning 5-3. So they haven't given up.
No, that's, and I don't want to say that's the problem, but yeah, the problem is they'll sweep the Cubs or whatever, then they'll turn around and lose the next 3. Every time I feel like, okay, they're back in it and they got a chance. It's been a weird season. It's just been, you can't trust them.
Every season feels like a weird season.
Yeah, it does. I agree. I should be numb to it. I should be numb.
We'll switch gears a little bit here. There were a couple things that I wanted to talk about before we get to Bengals training camp. But the first of which, Joe Burrow comes in at number 39, according to the NFL's top 100 list, which means that there are somehow 38 players in the NFL better than Joe Burrow, which means I think this list is full of shit. One of those players, oddly enough, who is ahead of Joe Burrow on that list, comes in at 38, Sauce Gardner. I love me some Sauce Gardner. I do not believe that he is better than Joe Burrow.
No, I can't say that either, because, your corner's involved in a lot of play, but your quarterback is involved in every play. And the only reason he's out, I didn't read the list and their reasoning, but I'm sure it's got to do with injuries. But all things being equal and all players being healthy, that's a top 10, top 5 guy in the league. There's just no doubt about it. I mean, seriously, it would be tough. You could, I'll give you Mahomes, and then after that, I don't know who you would start a franchise with other than Joe Burrow. You might say Lamar Jackson, but I think given all things a quarterback does, I might take Joe.
And I think that's how you have to think about this, is if you were doing a snake draft with all 32 teams, you're telling me that we're going one full round of building a fantasy team where you can pick any position and no one in the first round takes Joe Burrow.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
You're through almost another third of a round on the snake through before anybody takes Joe. Come on.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. That is not going to happen. There is no GM in the league that would be picking past 3 or 4 that would pass on that dude.
It's just crazy to me. And there was another thing this NFL Network.
Okay.
They also this week they had the top running backs, and Joe Mixon somehow, after being traded to the Texans, raised I believe 4 spots on that running back list, because he's now better as a Texan than he was as a Bengal, because there's just I just truthfully believe that there's hardcore media bias to the Cincinnati market in general, maybe to the Bengals specifically, because stuff doesn't get out to the media. You don't see a whole lot leaked out prior to things happening. I know we saw some of that last week with Adam Schefter going on his rant on Jamar Chase not wanting to play for $1 million, despite many receivers in the league, including Justin Jefferson, being only playing on the base salary for $1 million, even after the ramp up of his new extension. He's still only this season on his base salary, not including anything else, but just his base salary being paid $1 million. So, we're just out here just spewing nonsense before actually looking at facts. But well done, Adam Schefter.
Yeah, well, I don't see, and maybe I'm naive, but I don't see Jamar being a problem this year. We'll see. I don't think he's built that way.
He hasn't yet practiced, which is another thing I wanted to get to before we got to camp. But he has not yet practiced. We've seen T. Higgins taking days off as well. What do you think's going on here with?
I don't know. I heard Zach Taylor talk about it. It's like we have a plan for him, and da 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 da. I'm not sure what that's all about. I don't know, but he's showing up. He does not practice, so it's not like, I mean, if he were making a statement, I would think he wouldn't even be around, right? He'd probably be on a boat out in the Gulf of Mexico somewhere or something.
I imagine it's not a holdout. Clearly, I would imagine there's ongoing conversations, and who knows what those conversations currently are or what they entail. But I'd be jarred, I think is the word I'm going to go with, if there is not direct communication between both player and coach and agent and upper management on a daily basis in regards to everything going on.
I mean, I really believe they know what they have. They know who's important. They want to get back to the Super Bowl. I mean, that was such a great run for the Bengals. And quite honestly, I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but it kind of pulled them out of the dark ages onto the national stage where the Bengals were cool again, which, had been a while since that happened. I mean, really. They were cool with Carson Palmer and Ocho Cinco, but they ended up not really winning anything. So it kind of fizzled out. Before that, you got to go back to the 88 season and the Super Bowl. So, the Bengals are, even though last year wasn't a playoff year, I think around the league, and maybe it's not reflected in some of these media polls and that stuff, but I think fan-wise, I think they get a lot of attention and are a fairly popular team around the country.
Yeah, at this point, I think they've made just monumental strides from where they were in the 90s when I grew up watching them. They're not that team where people show up to games with bags on their heads.
Yes.
But they made a signing this week, as well as they bring in receiver Hakeem Butler. He is 6'5", the reigning UFL Offensive Player of the Year. They bring him in on a 1-year deal for $915,000. Big dude. He is a big dude, and he has clearly made some plays. He's a little old, I guess, to be playing his rookie season in the NFL at 28. But I'm encouraged by the fact that they're not done adding onto this roster, and they don't seem to be. They don't seem to be settling. They've added some pieces in the receiving core, and they weren't happy with where the room was yet. And I think that this makes the room better. It's deeper honestly, and better.
I think that's a pretty good group already, in my opinion. I like what they've done with the wide receiver position over the last several years, and Yossi Voss looking the way he is, and the other kid Charlie's having a good camp.
Charlie Jones,
Charlie Jones. He's had a good camp. You think Chase and Higgins, but and then you forget about some of the other guys who have stepped up and played well for him. So it's a pretty good group already. But give the Bengals credit and give Duke Tobin credit for going out there and still grinding and looking for guys. And they say they always do, and I believe that. I believe they pretty much have a line on everybody. And when somebody pops out there that they think might help, they're not shy about sticking their nose in there and trying to make a deal or at least getting involved. And that's light years from the days you were talking about. So it's good to see them being aggressive, proactive, and, still willing to add, because you know how it is. That's a game of attrition sometimes. And that doesn't mean, you have a guy, and who knows, this guy could end up on a practice squad, right? I mean, am I thinking that's right?
He could end up on a roster.
Oh no,
he could end up on the final roster. Who knows?
The active roster, you know, he could be a practice squad guy, and those guys. The practice squad is not a joke like it used to be in the old days. I mean, players can learn and grow and be on the practice squad for a year and be valuable pieces down the road. So you can't ever have enough. You can't have too many good players ever. And so I'm glad they're still being aggressive. They should be.
Also, let's not kid ourselves. The two guys at the top of that room in T. Higgins and Jamar Chase have both had plenty of instances of injuries over the course of the last several seasons. So
right, and I hope this isn't a sign that maybe they are sensing trouble with one of those guys. They need to add receivers, but it could make you think.
Time will tell. Outside of that, though, again, one last thing before we get to the actual camp talk. They unveiled the new locker rooms for the Cincinnati Bengals, and there's a lot to be excited about as you look at that locker room.
Man, I look at that thing and I remember what they used to have, and not their last one. Their last one was fine in my book, but man, what they do now, very cool, and very cool that they have the founder's autograph on each locker, Paul Brown. That's kind of a cool touch. There's a lot of black and orange, and it looks great. It looks terrific. I go back and forth on this. Tell me what you think. But I think in this day and age of free agency and wanting guys in your building all the time because, you have off-season workouts and all that stuff, this is the way to go. But there's always still a part of me that thinks there's something romantic about a Spartan old school locker room where you just don't have all these amenities, and you have this, and Paul Brown had talked about this a long time ago before all this stuff went sideways with free agency, because this would have been in the 80s, about Spartan environments and how that might make you have, take pride in that and be a little tougher, and maybe we don't have all the bells and whistles, but we'll knock your block off because we live a tougher existence, a tougher life. And I don't think that works anymore, but it does for me.
That generation has long passed the actual playing days.
I know, but you're talking about a guy who fought his garage door all day trying to get that fixed. And stuff, and it's I just appreciate that old school, the metal cages they had at Spinneyfield and all that stuff. But yeah, you're right. Those days are long gone. And now you got to have a guy come in that you want as a free agent to see that you're doing anything and everything to make these players comfortable. And it does make sense. Look, these guys, people look and think how they've got it made and they're making all this money doing it. These guys put their bodies through hell.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you come out of you play a football game on Sunday, I don't know how they do these Sunday, Thursday turnarounds. I mean, there's bumps and bruises and knots. And I mean, they get the hell beat out of them. And so you really do need to do everything you can. And I know they talk about how, the locker rooms within 30 seconds of everything, the training room, the weight room, the lunchroom. You need to make it easy on those guys because they put their bodies through hell. And now they're talking about maybe going up to 18 games at some point. I get it. I do get it. Well,
George,
your days are gone, but it's a new era.
You've seen the Bearcats' new locker room, and the Bearcats' new locker room was better than the Bengals' locker room. And
yes,
you've got to think that these professional athletes are thinking about the locker rooms that they're coming from at all these various schools and having better amenities at the university level that you would expect to have at the professional level, especially in a billion-dollar league.
Well, and that's why I at least they have the indoor bubble now. But they should have an indoor.
Yes, agreed.
Facility.
Agree.
They should have an indoor facility. They should have a tunnel where they, although I think some of the guys might enjoy that walk to the practice field, but I mean, you got to have a cop out there stopping traffic so these guys can get to practice. And the Steelers used to have a similar setup. I don't know if it still is. It probably is. Um, I don't know why. I'm sure there's all kinds of stuff underneath the street, electric lines and everything else. But I mean, there should be a tunnel that they can just go in and they're not out there dodging metro buses and stuff. Just or a bridge built or something. But there should also be a dedicated indoor facility and the whole thing. And they just got that a couple of years ago. I mean, for years, when UC got that bubble, the Bengals would go use that thing on days, in November and December where it was pouring down rain or whatever, because they needed to get their work in. And what do you think those guys were thinking when they're loading up on a bus to go up the hill to UC and use their practice bubble? And they're an NFL team, and they're coming from places that have every amenity in the world when you're playing at Georgia and LSU and Bama and so Texas. And UC is going to have that stuff here in a year. They'll have their own dedicated indoor facility with the offices and all the other bells and whistles. So I think it's time for the Bengals to do that too.
Yeah, it'll be. We'll see if they ever become a team that doesn't continue to get the hashtag poverty on social media. So,
well, I remember back in 2003 or 4, Marvin started thumping the tub for a bubble, right? An indoor facility. How long did it take? He never saw it. He was gone before they got it.
It all has to start somewhere.
Years.
George, when he was here, they were also using used jock straps. So, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. So, they've come up leaps and bounds since those days.
No, they have. There's still more that can be done. And what blows me away, as you said, $1 billion industry, and they print money. You cannot convince me otherwise. The NFL is printing money. It is the monster. And when you look at those television numbers, holy God, I can tell you that we would have anywhere from 5. Okay, let me do quick math. Let's just say 4. Okay, so we would have anywhere from 5 to 10 times the audience coming out of a Bengals game for our news. Say we had a primetime game on, than you would on the average night. So you think about what you get because those games are doing, I don't know, 50 shares or more in the market, which is ridiculous. And the raw number is ridiculous too. The rating number is just like, holy God, they don't make numbers like that anymore. They used to, back when there was just 3 or 4 channels you could get over the air, or before cable. But that's unheard of now, but the NFL still gets it.
Yeah. So camp opened, and we've seen Joe Burrow. I guess I saw somewhere that he says he got bored, and that's why he shaved his head. I know we talked about that last week. But I did see somewhere, and I don't know if there's any truth to this or not, but I guess a cancer survivor or somebody going through chemo approached him and asked him to shave his head like he'd had. And Joe apparently doesn't want to talk about this publicly and has not yet. I don't know if there's any truth to any of that, but something that I did read online. But we've seen Joe looking good. Joe's looked good thus far through several days of camp. They've given him full clearance already. I think that took a day or 2 before he did get full clearance in regards to recovering from that injury. And it seems like he's got the green light. Again, we haven't seen the receiver tandem of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins together on the field. Trent Brown continues to sit out, so it means that the draft pick in Mims is getting plenty of reps there at the tackle spot. We've seen some injuries. Sam Hubbard had to leave on a cart. Doesn't seem like that's anything terribly.
Yeah, they dodged a bullet there. It sounds like.
But camp's in full go, and we're seeing guys like
Gesicki out with something, right? Trey Hendrickson's been out a little bit with something, and I don't know. It's undisclosed, but hopefully everything's okay there. I don't know any reason to think it's anything serious, but
who knows? I mean, he's had quite the offseason with regards to his contract and all of that weird stuff. And he's also a veteran.
Like him, that was so bizarre, but
he's also a grizzled vet who doesn't necessarily need the camp reps this early.
No, that's a guy that can show up, and he's still gonna do the things he does. He knows what he's doing. Very driven player. Hopefully Burrow gets in a full camp, and hopefully these wide receivers get out there enough that all that works out. It'll be really, really good for this team to go into this season full steam ahead, and they know how important a fast start is because they were hampered by it last year and the year before, but more specifically last year, it really bit them. Yeah, I'm very happy for Joe. Back to the hair thing, and I was watching some NFL Network stuff, and they said that BJ Hill showed up, I think today.
He did. There was a bet there.
Yeah.
He did. Yep.
So they said that BJ had told Joe if he did it, he would do it, and then Joe showed up with it, and so the heat was on.
Sure enough.
Good for him.
Yep.
That's funny stuff. It's good when teams have fun like that and things like that.
I agree.
And if I'm Joe, I want that short hair anyway for training camp. I mean, my God, it was humid as all get out today. I just think, so far so good. It's only camp, but everyone's singing the same tune. And, it's got a little more than a month before that first game. And, so far so good. I just hope to see Hubbard, Hendrickson, Chase, and Higgins on that field, before they suit up for real.
I did see that it's been reported that Chase Brown is getting the first team reps over Zach Moss at the running back spot. Do you put any stock in that, or do you just chalk that up to camp?
I kind of chalk it up to camp. I think Chase Brown has shown some serious promise. Is he an every down pounder? I don't think they even make those anymore. I mean, I guess Mixon kind of was, but you still got to spot those guys. So they're both going to get a lot of work, I think. And I'm very comfortable with both of those guys. I mean, what I saw out of Brown as a rookie was very encouraging. He's the so-called home run hitter, and Zach Moss has proven himself and seemed to be getting better as he went along in his career. So I feel good about that part of their game too. And it all starts with that offensive line. And, I know, Mims has been getting the reps with Brown out, but that's not a bad thing. That's good for that rookie to get in there. And all indications are he's been impressive.
Yeah, he's a bulldozer of a human. You also had your 4th round pick, tight end Eric All out of Fairfield. He is back in action officially today. Said he was cleared about a month before he even anticipated being cleared himself.
That's good, and I wish nothing but the best for him. And hopefully that tight end position is a little more of a plus this year. They've kind of whiffed a little bit in free agency on that. And some of that was due to injuries, but with Gesicki in there and his regimen, he said he catches 200 balls a day.
I saw that. I did
see that.
I saw that. He
feeds the damn jugs machine.
Yep.
So now in camp he does 160, I guess.
Because he said he does part of his regimen is 20 high and 20 low, and you have to move the jugs machine for that, and he doesn't bother.
Yeah, I saw that.
He doesn't bother to move it.
It's funny. But that shows the kind of work, that these dudes put in, and God, you have to, because you're competing against the best of the best, and it's that just shows me there's a hell of a work ethic right there. So I feel you know, health is everything, but I feel pretty good about that tight end room right now.
Are you planning on trying to get to any camps before they do break camp? Or
Yeah,
before...
I may get down there. I got to try to get to higher ground too, which I will get to. I got a planned day for that. But yeah, I kind of miss that. I do miss that. I was thinking about that today. I'll tell you what I was thinking about. It was in those news conferences that the UC coaches had. And it's like,
Yep.
God, I used to be in the middle of all this stuff every day. And it's like you took for granted how much you knew and how much these guys said, and everything would rattle around up here. But I knew what the hell was going on every single day. And I kind of miss being in the middle of that. I don't miss golfing a lot. I like golfing a lot, but I do miss, it's like I have to catch up every day and it used to be I was just immersed in it. So it's a little different dynamic for me to keep up with this stuff. But yeah, I'll go down to camp and sit with the fans, and I'll probably be screaming for autographs too. You never know. Hey, Joe, sign this.
Wouldn't put it past you. You guys have almost the same hair color right now, so.
Yeah, you're right. Mine's a little longer. I got to get it
cut. But you bring up the pressers. Today was the last day before UC starts football camp, and it'll start here at Nippert Stadium tomorrow. We actually will have camp to talk about, but Chad and I recorded the nightcap already discussing the pressers of Scott Satterfield and Tyson Veit and Brad Glenn. Did you have any big takeaways as you got to watch those pressers?
First of all, out of all of them, I was really interested and glad to hear Brad Glenn talk about the red zone and what they thought about that in the offseason and what they've done and what they're thinking going forward. And he went back to it, talking about tight ends and the use of tight ends in the red zone, and the deep or the low red zone, and how bad they were in those situations. And it was really, as someone who sat there and watched that and saw it, I just feel like the program and also what struck me is Satterfield, Veit, and Glenn, all three seem to have, I can see why these guys are on the same coaching staff, because they had a lot of the same demeanor, just how they handled questions. They were wide open about it, but they have analytical minds. It was just interesting. It was just, I'm watching that, and it's not like they were the, just an old school gruff football coach. They were very thoughtful. I was interested. They all held my interest, and it was, for me, it was enjoyable to watch, and it made me feel better about the hands this program's in. I know a lot of people are still down on Coach Satterfield and this staff and how crappy things went last year, but I do think there were some reasons out of their control, and I feel like, and we'll see the results, but I do feel like they owned that. And I think every one of them pretty much, and Veit wasn't here, obviously, but every one of them acknowledged how poorly things went last year. And even the article Keegan did with Kerry Combs talking about the botched kicks and punts last year on special teams that, essentially cost them 2 games. It was just interesting, all the ownership that the coaches took and what they said they were doing to get that right. And yes, they should do that. That should be a given with the job, but not a lot of coaches will verbalize it the way they did. So that kind of, I know I went way off the rails there and kind of into the weeds. That hit me.
If you're going to try and deflect that this team was anything less than poor on every front, offense, defense, and special teams,
oh my God.
You're just lying to yourself and lying to the people that you're talking to. So I think they did what you had to do, and they took it on the chin, and they've talked about righting the ship. They've talked about getting things right as far as the team connectivity. They've talked about getting things right as far as the discipline goes, and ways that they've tried to improve the discipline of the team. And I think all of that was pretty interesting in the ways that they talked about that today.
And talking about some of the leaders on the team too, and guys who took on those roles and said, we're responsible, and talking about, if a guy shows up a minute late in the weight room, he's pitched out, and it's like, dude, come back Saturday.
You're going to have the team, not by the coaches, but by the team.
By the team, yes, and that's huge. There was just a lot of good stuff in there about that. And then when Coach Satterfield talked about the roster turnover, and he's like, we have 47 new players, and then he even stops. He's like, that's over half the roster of scholarship players that are new here this year. That's crazy. Now, we're in the age of the portal, so there's going to be more of that. But man, oh man, that kind of hit me, and I'm like, holy God. And so it kind of tempered my expectations a little bit, because it's tough to turn that big ship, in one off season. But we're going to see what kind of job they did. But I was impressed with all three of those guys, and the way they seem to have handled the offseason. And this offseason was just critical for this program. We'll see if they get it going the right way. And I see their 5.5 wins is the preseason win total, I think I saw.
Yes.
And I don't know which way to go on that. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I thought the win total was a lock last year after the first 2 weeks.
We all did.
I know. What the hell? So I'm not doubting the Vegas line setters, the odds makers, but I don't know. It's going to be a very interesting season. But man, with that offensive line back, and it was good to hear Coach Glenn saying that they can, he feels good about their top 9 offensive linemen, not just the starting 5, but 4 more coming back that he thinks can contribute and be good offensive linemen for them this year. So when you've got those running backs they have, and that, we'll see if this quarterback, can connect with it. And they turned over the receivers the way they did. It's just, I don't know what to expect. I just know that I felt pretty good about what the coaches were saying.
Well, I think that leads me into probably the last question of the night. But I'm curious as to what your top 3 things in camp, questions that you have that you want to see answered.
I'm not going to start with the quarterback. I'm starting with the defensive backfield and how that all shakes out. It's a new scheme too.
It is.
So, are they going to have the corners? Who's left? Jordan Young's left.
Kalen Carroll.
Kalen Carroll's left. Right. They picked up 2 other corners in the portal. That
a ton of safeties.
What's that?
They picked up a ton of safeties.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's that's huge, because that killed them last year. That just killed them. They gave up so many big plays. So that's one. Obviously, I'm going to say the quarterback is 2, because they didn't get very good quarterback play last year. And sometimes a quarterback can rescue you when you are having struggles in other areas. They can make big plays, and we'll see. He said the competition is still open. I think it's Sorsby's to lose. That's just how I see it. I just think that kid's, you look at the video of him, his size. We'll see. But that's going to be interesting. And then, I mentioned the wide receivers, because I think the running game's going to be fine. They turned over a boatload of wide receivers. I don't know who, there's, some of the guys have been around, and he mentioned some that have improved to the point. And I don't know. I don't know who, and I think we're going to see a lot of rotation in that department. I think there's going to be a lot of different wide receivers run out there. And, they did say the same thing about the defense. He had good things to say about Corleone and his prognosis, which surprised me. I wasn't sure he would play this year. Certainly wasn't sure he'd play early. He was talking like he may be all right from the get-go. What did you get out of that?
We'll see. I'm sure you're as a coach, you're always going to speak in a positive light. You're not going to give the media, especially on an injury, any more than necessary. But it sounded like he's where he's supposed to be. He's listening to the doctors. He's working out with the team. He's running with the team. But I would imagine it's not anything too awfully strenuous. He's not, probably not working for max weight on anything or pushing himself any harder than need be on any of these runs or anything like that. I imagine he probably has a huge microscope on him right now as he does anything. Sure, absolutely.
Absolutely. I think, and I will say this, and I think we talked about this before with him, that you see what I can tell for a long time now. And I guess some of it has to do because they're just there's so much medical around there and so many, they do right by those players every single time. I mean, one of the players never played last year and wasn't cleared and left the program to go find somewhere else he might be able to play because they just weren't clearing here because they weren't comfortable. And
I think the bigger concern I have is the fact that Micah Coleman is now. Coach told us that Micah Coleman's going to miss the season. So you're missing a defensive end in the rotation. You're potentially, and even if Corleone comes back, I imagine you still have a healthy leash on him for a while. So you're going to have some rotation there that you're going to be missing.
Well, that pass rush is something that was not really what it was supposed to be
right
here either.
Right. So I guess one of the concerns that I have right now, as far as the defense goes, I think I'm probably every bit as concerned with the defensive line and that rotation as I am with the defensive backfield.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can certainly understand that, and I am a big believer it all starts up front. Last year, that wasn't always necessarily the case because there was just some busted coverages that were ridiculous. I could have punted the ball to some of those receivers. Seriously.
I know.
But it does start up front. I mean, you've got to have guys in the quarterback's face. You've got to make him uncomfortable. And they did not do that a whole lot last year, especially as the season wore on and there was attrition and they're playing better teams. And it got ugly, as we all know.
So we'll see how that goes. But again, camp kicks off tomorrow. Nippert for 3 days. And then this weekend, they will start at Camp Higher Ground. I believe Sunday is the first day, if I'm not mistaken. I think Saturday is the move-in
environment anywhere. That is just such a cool setting for them to get these guys. And it's not as Spartan as here I go, the Spartan environment. But that is like those dudes go out there and they eat, sleep, drink football, and it's definitely a good bonding experience. Didn't work last year, but every other year, and it's just funny how other teams with coaches who are at Cincinnati trying to pry that away, and God bless those guys out at Higher Ground and that family out there for keeping it in the UC family.
Well, as we all know, at least you, me, and Chad know, if you're going to eat, sleep, and everything football, Higher Ground has some of the best eatings for doing that anywhere.
No doubt about it. Home-cooked meals. They got a staff that, I mean, they know how to cook out there.
You aren't lying. Hopefully we're able to get out there at the same time, though, George. So we'll see if we can't line that up.
I'll let you know. I got a date and I couldn't find it in my phone today. I was wondering where that was, what date that. I don't know. My kid usually drives me out there.
We'll see if we can figure that out. Reds win, by the way, 6-3 final score. They beat the Cubs.
Yes.
So they at least win the series. So we'll see what
And
happens.
3 games under 500 now.
3 games under. Any FCC? They're off right now, so nothing to cover there. Anything going on in
that Leagues Cup thing? They got a match Thursday night. Yeah.
Anything going on in the high school realm?
Oh yeah, they're getting ready to crank up practices, and they'll be getting after it. Not like the old days with the two-a-days, but they'll be getting after it.
All right. Well, until next Tuesday, that's going to wrap it up. We will see you back here on this same channel, whether you are watching us on the YouTube or the Twitch channels. But again, thank you to Remington Tavern for sponsoring us here. You can find them at 8892 Glendale Milford Road, 45140, where they have daily happy hour, 37 p.m., $5 bourbon whiskey Wednesdays, bottle cap bonanza Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. You can find them on Instagram at RemyTavCincy or follow them on Facebook. But for George Vogel, I'm Aaron Smith. We'll see you next Tuesday, 9 o'clock, right back here.